In the middle of July, when the air in Black Hollow turned thick enough to chew, Eleanor Whitaker stood before her shelves of dried herbs and felt her hands tremble, not from age, from something else. The shelves ran from floor to ceiling along the west wall of her cabin, bundles of St. John's wort tied with twine, jars of foxglove seeds, sage wrapped in brown paper, long strands of thyme hanging like brittle chandeliers. For 30 years, these shelves had steadied her. Whenever the world felt too loud, too sudden, too full of questions she could not answer, she organized, measured, dried, labeled. Plants obeyed seasons. People did not. The cabin windows were open, letting in the hum of cicadas and the slow pulse of heat rolling off the Kentucky hills. Dust drifted in shafts of light like lazy spirits with nowhere better to be. It was always like this in July, the air heavy with wild grass and old wood. And always, around this time, the same feeling returned. A pressure, as if something waited just beyond the edge of understanding. She ran her fingers through a bundle of dried thyme. The brittle stems crackled faintly. She knew these herbs better than she knew most people in town. She knew which leaf cooled fever, which root calmed nerves, which flower dulled pain long enough for a man to believe he could keep living. But lately, while sorting and binding, she had begun to wonder something she never allowed herself to speak aloud. Had she misunderstood what she was healing? In the center of her cabin, laid out on the long oak table, rested a body. Not her first, not even close. Small towns keep their dead close. Tradition in Black Hollow required the departed to remain at home at least a full day before burial. Families washed them, prayed over them, sat beside them. Eleanor's cabin had become the place for that waiting. People trusted her hands, steady, practical, unsentimental. She did not believe in spells. She despised gossip about witches. She had no patience for mysticism. She believed in poultices, in salves, in anatomy learned through observation and hard seasons. The man on the table was named Daniel Carter. He lived 2 houses down. He drank quietly. No shouting, no broken windows, just steady, determined drinking, as if each swallow might erase something he did not want to remember. Now his face lay gray and slack beneath the open window. Eleanor stood over him, folding a linen cloth across his chest. She felt no fear, only that peculiar weight that comes with the dead, when argument becomes pointless and only forgiveness remains. The front door burst open so hard it struck the wall. She did not jump. She turned slowly. A man stepped in wearing a tailored gray coat far too refined for Black Hollow. 2 younger men followed him, carrying leather cases polished to a city shine. His eyes were sharp, appraising. Dr. Samuel Hargrove of Lexington, the county surgeon. "I apologize for the intrusion, Mrs. Whitaker," he said briskly, though his tone held little apology. "Time is of importance." "In this house," she replied calmly, "folks enter with words before they enter with boots." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Then he inclined his head. "My apologies." He stepped closer to the table, examining Daniel's body not with grief, but with calculation. "He signed consent," Hargrove continued, "to donate his remains to medical research." Eleanor nodded once. "He mentioned it." "He drank himself into organ failure. That much is clear." Hargrove removed his coat and slipped into a long white surgical smock. "But there are anomalies I intend to study." His assistants opened their cases. Steel instruments gleamed. Chisels, forceps, long knives made for more than simple cuts. Eleanor did not look away. She watched. Daniel's body was moved slightly, repositioned under lamplight, though it was still day. Hargrove leaned in close, as if listening beneath the stillness of death. The first incision came with a clean, practiced motion. The sound, a dull, soft separation, filled the room. "Liver destroyed," Hargrove murmured. "Cardiac tissue compromised. Alcohol is a predictable killer." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "I've seen men drink and live long," she said quietly, "because sometimes it's not the body that's sick." Hargrove did not look up. "Science concerns causes, not excuses." "And what of the man?" she asked. "Do you dissect that too?" His hands paused for a fraction of a second, then continued. He lifted the heart carefully, turning it in his palm like a specimen rather than something that once beat with regret, hope, anger. "People destroy themselves," he said flatly. "There is no divine permission involved, just biology." Eleanor studied him then, the hollowness around his eyes, the faint tremor beneath his composure. "You've seen war," she said. He did not answer. She knew she was right. He placed the heart into a metal tray. "I've buried nearly 300 souls," Eleanor said softly. "Some leave gently. Some claw their way toward the grave. I still don't know why." Hargrove did not respond, but silence hung heavier than disagreement. The assistants stepped back, uneasy beneath the tension. After a moment, Eleanor spoke again. "You're certain there is no God who watches this?" Hargrove let out a thin, humorless laugh. "If there were, he would not remain silent." She stepped closer. "Stay tonight." He looked at her sharply. "Excuse me?" "Stay. The body remains until morning. If you're so certain of your conclusions, ask him yourself." The assistants exchanged uneasy glances. "The dead do not answer questions," Hargrove said. "Then you have nothing to fear." A long pause stretched between them. The cicadas outside screamed in the heat. Finally, Hargrove exhaled. "Very well, but I will need something to occupy the hours." Eleanor reached for a thick, worn notebook from the shelf. Her life's work, handwritten over decades. Her herbal records. She handed it to him without hesitation. "If you're staying," she said, "you might as well learn something." He accepted it. Their fingers brushed. His were colder than he expected hers to be. By the time evening settled over Black Hollow, Eleanor had left for a neighbor's house, giving the surgeon his solitude. Inside the cabin, under lamplight and the scent of dried sage, Dr. Samuel Hargrove stood alone with the body of Daniel Carter. And the night was just beginning. By the time the last streak of sunlight drained from the hills, the cabin had taken on a different shape. Darkness did not simply fall in Black Hollow. It settled, thick and deliberate, pressing against the windows like something curious. Dr. Samuel Hargrove stood alone beside the long oak table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, Eleanor Whitaker's leather-bound notebook open before him. The handwriting surprised him. Precise, measured, observational. No charms, no incantations. Detailed accounts of fevers broken with willow bark, infections slowed by poultices of crushed comfrey. Notes on pulse irregularities, breathing patterns, seasonal illnesses, patterns of grief. He frowned. This was not superstition. It was field science born without university walls. A knock sounded softly at the cabin door. Hargrove stiffened. One of the assistants stepped inside. A young man in his early 20s, tall and fair-haired, spectacles slipping down his nose. "Sir, I hope I'm not intruding." "Gideon," Hargrove exhaled. "I assumed you'd gone back to town." "I tried." The young man shut the door behind him. "But the road felt wrong tonight." Hargrove gave him a look. "Wrong how?" Gideon hesitated, embarrassed by his own answer. "Too quiet." Hargrove returned to the notebook. "Superstition spreads easily in small towns. Stay if you must, but keep your head clear." Gideon nodded, stepping closer to the table. Daniel Carter lay where they had left him. Chest cavity opened, organs catalogued, tools arranged neatly on linen cloth. The air had shifted, not colder, just denser. Hargrove closed the notebook slowly. "If we are to spend the night indulging Mrs. Whitaker's theatrics," he said dryly, "we may as well make use of the time." Gideon swallowed. "What do you propose?" "An anomaly." Hargrove lifted Daniel's right hand. 6 fingers. Gideon leaned in. He had noticed it earlier, but dismissed it as a curiosity. The extra finger sat between ring and pinky, fully formed, not a malformed growth, but a functional digit. "The townspeople said he used it normally," Hargrove continued. "That makes it rare. Very rare." He reached for a scalpel. "Record everything." Gideon retrieved pen and paper, hands slightly unsteady. The incision began at the base of the 6th finger. Careful, controlled, skin parted cleanly. Beneath it, tendons branched differently than standard anatomical diagrams suggested. Hargrove narrowed his eyes. Remarkable. The tendon extended deep into the palm, interwoven with the primary muscular structure. Not an appendage, an integration. "Nature exceeds our textbooks," Hargrove murmured. They followed the tendons upward. Palm, wrist, forearm. Each structure connected seamlessly, as though the hand had always been meant to hold more than 5. Gideon whispered under his breath. "It's like it belongs." "It does belong," Hargrove corrected. "That is the point." They worked in near silence for nearly an hour. Outside, wind began moving through the trees. The cabin creaked faintly. At the shoulder joint, Hargrove paused. Something felt off. He could not name it. Just an absence of expected ambient noise. No insects, no distant dogs barking. He lifted his head slowly. The shadows in the corners of the cabin seemed deeper than before. Gideon noticed it too. "Sir?" Hargrove did not respond immediately. He adjusted the lantern. The flame flickered, then steadied. He glanced back at Daniel's face. The body had not shifted. Everything remained as it should. Except the eyelids were no longer fully closed. Not wide, just barely parted. Gideon's breath caught. "Sir, his eyes." Hargrove leaned in slowly. The pupils stared straight ahead, not unfocused, not rolled back, centered, watching. He felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not belief, not yet, but something cracking beneath certainty. "Do not move," he whispered. Gideon froze. The body remained perfectly still. Chest open, heart removed, tendons exposed. Yet the eyes held awareness. Hargrove forced himself closer, examining, testing. The corneas reflected lamplight. There was no breathing, no pulse, and yet the gaze tracked him. Slowly, deliberately.
As he shifted to the left, the eyes followed. Gideon stumbled backward, knocking into a shelf of dried sage. Bundles fell to the floor. The scent exploded into the air. Sharp, earthy, alive. "Sir." "Silence," Hargrove hissed. The room felt smaller, compressed. Daniel Carter's lips parted slightly. Not enough to speak, just enough to prove control. Hargrove's mind raced. Cardiac removal makes revival impossible. Brain hypoxia beyond minutes ensures cellular death. This is reflex. This is nerve discharge. This is... The eyes blinked. Once. Slow. Moist. Gideon made a strangled sound. The cabin fell into a silence so complete it felt engineered. And then, Daniel Carter sat up. Not violently, not jerking like a puppet. Smoothly, as though rising from sleep. His open chest cavity remained exposed, dark and hollow where the heart had been. He swung his legs over the side of the table.
Feet touched the wooden floor. Hargrove's scalpel slipped from his hand and clattered. The sound echoed far too loudly. Daniel stood. His movements were stiff but purposeful. He walked toward the window first, paused, then turned toward the old mirror hanging by the door. He leaned forward, studying his own reflection with detached curiosity, as if reacquainting himself with borrowed flesh. When he spoke, the voice was hoarse, layered, too full for a body missing its center. "Good evening," it said calmly. "How is the specimen?" Gideon collapsed backward into a chair. Hargrove felt his rational mind fracture cleanly in half. "I removed your heart," he whispered. The thing wearing Daniel Carter's face traced a finger along the edge of the open ribcage. Dark fluid seeped slowly down his abdomen. "Cold," it murmured. "You had questions." Hargrove's breath trembled. "This is impossible." The corpse turned fully toward him, eyes bright, intent. "Ask." And somewhere beyond the cabin walls, something in Black Hollow listened. The thing wearing Daniel Carter's body tilted its head slightly, as if studying Dr. Hargrove with academic curiosity. "Ask," it repeated. Gideon's breathing had become shallow, frantic. He fumbled for the small cross hanging beneath his shirt, but did not yet pull it free. Hargrove forced himself upright. He had stood in operating tents while artillery thundered in the distance. He had watched men die in his hands. He had catalogued horrors with steady fingers. This would be no different. It could not be different. "You are dead," Hargrove said carefully. "Your heart is removed, your organs compromised. Neural function should have ceased hours ago." The corpse gave a low sound that might have been laughter. "Should." The word lingered unnaturally in the air. Hargrove swallowed. "If this is some reflexive phenomenon, some final misfire of nerve clusters." "You want to know what comes after," the thing interrupted gently. The cabin seemed to shrink further. The lantern flame flickered again. Hargrove's throat tightened. "Yes," he said. He hadn't meant to answer so quickly, but the question had lived inside him for years. What comes after? Not heaven, not angels, not pearled gates, but something measurable, something definable. The corpse stepped closer to the table where Eleanor's notebook lay open. It placed its palm against the pages. "I will answer," it said, "but knowledge requires exchange." Gideon finally ripped the cross free from his shirt. "You are not Daniel Carter," he whispered hoarsely. "You're something else."
The corpse smiled faintly. Of course. Hargrove felt a tremor run through his limbs, but he did not step back. "What are you?" he demanded. The eyes shifted toward him again. "Not what you call spirit, not what you call soul. Those imply identity." It took another slow step. "From where I come, identity dissolves." Hargrove's mouth felt dry. "Then answer." The corpse leaned forward slightly. "If you wish to understand what follows death," it said softly, "remember what preceded birth." The words struck him like cold water. Before birth, nothing. No memory, no awareness, no time. "Absence," Hargrove whispered. The corpse nodded once, but deeper. Gideon shook his head violently. No, that's not. "There is no light," the thing continued. "No darkness either. Darkness implies contrast. There is no thought, no self, no waiting." It looked almost sympathetic. "There is no you." The words sank into Hargrove's chest like stones. "So oblivion," he said. "Not even oblivion," the corpse corrected gently. "Oblivion suggests something to experience it." The lantern dimmed slightly. "After death," it said, "there is nothing. Not emptiness, not void. The absence of all measure." Gideon's knees buckled.
"This is blasphemy," he choked. "You lie." The corpse's gaze slid toward him. "I do not lie. There is no purpose in lying from where I stand." Hargrove felt something inside him collapse. Years of lectures, years of arguments against clergy, years spent insisting that faith was a comfort mechanism for fragile minds. And yet, hearing the absence spoken aloud felt worse than any vision of hell. "Then why speak at all?" he demanded. The corpse's smile widened slightly. "Because you invited inquiry." It tapped the notebook lightly. "And because she permitted it." Hargrove's pulse thudded painfully. "Mrs. Whitaker?" "Names are unimportant." The cabin floor creaked. Outside, wind brushed against the walls like breath. Gideon began muttering prayer under his breath. The corpse inhaled slowly, though no lungs filled. "You have more questions," it said to Hargrove. He did. So many. But the weight of the answer pressed on him. If there is nothing, if life ends in absolute erasure, then meaning dissolves, sacrifice dissolves, justice dissolves. "Is there judgment?" he asked quietly. "No." "Is there balance?" "No." "Is there memory of who we were?" "No." The responses came without hesitation, each one clean, final. Gideon suddenly shouted, voice cracking, "Enough!" He stumbled forward, clutching the cross, pressing it outward toward the corpse. "In the name of—" The reaction was immediate. The corpse recoiled sharply, not dramatically, but undeniably. Its expression shifted. Not pain, not fear, but irritation. The lantern flame flared brighter for half a second. Gideon's voice strengthened. "You claim nothing matters. You claim there is no God, no meaning, no light." The corpse's eyes darkened. "Correct. Then why do you recoil?" Silence. A thin, stretched silence. Hargrove felt it too, a tension in the air like pressure before a storm. The corpse straightened slowly. "I do not recoil." Gideon pressed closer. "You flinched." The corpse's voice deepened slightly. "Belief alters behavior." Hargrove's mind seized on that. "Belief," he repeated. "But you said nothing matters." To you, the response was sharp now. Meaning is a construct within flesh. Outside flesh, it dissolves. Gideon's hands trembled, but he did not lower the cross. If there is no God, he said, then why bargain? The corpse went still. Hargrove's stomach dropped. Bargain? He whispered. The corpse turned its gaze back to him. Knowledge requires exchange. There it was again, exchange. What do you want? Hargrove asked. The corpse's expression softened unnervingly. You are preparing a treatise, it said, on alcohol's destructive effects, on neural degeneration, on moral collapse through chemical erosion. Hargrove's breath caught. Yes. You will alter it. The words fell gently. You will publish conclusions stating moderate alcohol consumption has negligible harm, perhaps even benefit. Gideon stared. That's absurd. The corpse ignored him. You will discourage hysteria. You will soften warnings. Hargrove's pulse roared in his ears. That would cost lives. Lives end regardless. You would have me lie? Not lie, it said calmly. Reframe. Gideon's voice rose again. You feed on ruin. The corpse's smile returned. Order among deaths is efficient. The temperature in the cabin dropped noticeably. Hargrove's mind raced. If this thing is truly from nothingness, why would it care about alcohol policy? Why influence mortality patterns? Why intervene at all? Unless... You are not nothing, he said slowly. The corpse's eyes narrowed. You seek to maintain despair, Hargrove continued, voice growing steadier. If there were truly no meaning beyond flesh, you would not require cooperation. Silence. Heavy. Gideon whispered, Sir. You recoiled from the cross, Hargrove pressed. You react to belief. You demand falsehood. The corpse's jaw tightened subtly.
If I propagate hopelessness, Hargrove said, you gain something. The cabin walls groaned faintly, which means there is something to gain. The corpse's gaze hardened. You misunderstand. No, Hargrove said, breath strengthening. I finally understand. Gideon stared at him in disbelief. You are not emptiness, Hargrove continued. You are opposition. The lantern flared violently. Shadows leapt across the walls. The corpse's expression shifted, just for a fraction of a second. Annoyance, then anger, and in that flicker, Hargrove felt certainty pierce through doubt. If evil exists, he said quietly, then so does good. The corpse's voice dropped into something colder. Careful. Hargrove took one step forward. You tried to sell me despair. The corpse's posture changed, less composed, more predatory. And you refused, it said. Yes. The air in the cabin tightened. The corpse tilted its head once more. Payment, it said softly. And before either man could move, it lunged. The movement was faster than flesh should allow. Daniel Carter's body crossed the space between them in a blur of gray skin and dark blood. Gideon did not even finish his prayer. The corpse's hand struck him across the side of the head with a sound like splitting timber. Bone gave way. Gideon fell without a cry. The cross slipped from his fingers and clattered across the floorboards. Silence followed. Thick, unforgiving. Hargrove stood frozen, his breath trapped somewhere between his lungs and his throat. Gideon's body lay twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood spread slowly across the wood beneath him. The corpse straightened. Its movements regained that terrible calm.
"You mistake defiance for protection," it said evenly. Hargrove's knees threatened to give out, but he forced himself to remain standing. "You said the price would be knowledge," he rasped. "It is." The corpse looked down at Gideon without emotion. "He believed in light," it said.
Belief strengthens resistance. Hargrove's voice cracked. He was a boy. He was meat, the corpse corrected. The word struck harder than the blow had. Hargrove's mind raced, not with logic now, but with clarity. It had reacted to the cross. It had recoiled from conviction. It had demanded despair, and when denied, it took. "You are not nothing," Hargrove said hoarsely. The corpse's eyes burned with something far too focused to be emptiness. "You persist in that error." "No," Hargrove whispered. "You persist in lying." The corpse stepped closer again. Blood from its open chest cavity dripped steadily to the floor. "I do not lie," it said softly. "Then why require my words?" Hargrove demanded. "Why interfere in what men believe? If all dissolves, why care what I publish?" For the first time, the corpse did not answer immediately. The silence stretched. The lantern flame shrank until the room hovered at the edge of darkness. Hargrove felt fear coil in his gut, but beneath it, something steadier. Understanding. "You are not from nothing," he continued. "You are from somewhere." The corpse's jaw tightened. "You are not absence," Hargrove pressed. "You are corruption." The air snapped tight. The corpse's voice deepened. "Careful, Doctor." "You prey on despair," Hargrove said. "You trade hopelessness for obedience. That is not void, that is will." The corpse's eyes darkened further. "There is no throne," it said. "No kingdom of fire." "Perhaps not," Hargrove replied. "But there is opposition." The corpse moved suddenly, grabbing Hargrove by the collar and lifting him clean off the floor. The surgeon felt his back strike the wall hard enough to rattle the shelves. Glass jars shattered, dried herbs spilled like brittle rain. "You speak beyond your station," the corpse hissed. Its breath smelled of iron and rot. Hargrove's hands clawed at the wrist gripping him, but he did not look away. "You reacted," he gasped, "when he prayed." The corpse's grip tightened. "Belief alters the fabric of flesh," it said through clenched teeth. "So you admit it," Hargrove forced out. "It matters." The corpse hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Hargrove seized it. "If there were truly nothing beyond death, you would not fear conviction," he said. "You would not bargain. You would not need me." The corpse's expression flickered. Anger sharpened. Then, something colder. "You want truth?" it said. "Yes." The word left Hargrove's lips without hesitation. The corpse released him abruptly. He fell hard to the floor, coughing, lungs burning. The corpse stepped back toward the table. "Truth," it said quietly, "is not comfort." Hargrove pushed himself upright. "Nor is despair." The corpse tilted its head. "You think belief saves you?" "I think you require disbelief." The lantern flame flared once more. The corpse's smile returned, but thinner now. "Very well," it said. "Let us clarify." It walked back toward the mirror. Blood left dark footprints behind it. It stared at its reflection again. "You believe I am evil." "Yes." "You believe evil implies good." "Yes." "You believe good implies God." Hargrove swallowed. "Yes." The corpse turned slowly. And you believe God implies meaning? I do. The corpse's gaze sharpened. And what if meaning requires suffering? Hargrove faltered. The corpse took one slow step toward him. What if despair is permitted? Another step. What if pain is necessary? The room felt suffocating. What if the silence of heaven is intentional? Hargrove's throat tightened. You attempt to twist logic, he said. No, the corpse replied calmly. I illuminate consequence. It gestured toward Gideon's body. You refused the exchange. Hargrove's eyes burned. You killed him. I fulfilled payment. Hargrove's fists clenched. You are not permitted. The corpse laughed softly. Permitted? Yes. The word surprised even him. He stood straighter. You required invitation, he said. You said she permitted it. The corpse's eyes flicked briefly toward the door. Understanding dawned slowly. Eleanor Whitaker. She sent me to ask, Hargrove murmured. And you asked, the corpse replied. So you answer only when invited. Silence. The corpse did not confirm, but it did not deny. Hargrove's heartbeat steadied. You cannot remain without consent. The lantern flame steadied as well. You misinterpret boundaries, the corpse said carefully. You require a door, Hargrove pressed, an opening. The corpse's expression hardened. And if I do, then I close it. The air seemed to contract violently. The corpse's voice dropped to a whisper. You think you can? Hargrove stepped toward the fallen cross, slowly, deliberately. The corpse did not move, but tension rippled through its posture. Hargrove picked up the cross. His hand trembled, not from doubt, from magnitude. You told me nothing waits after death, he said quietly. But you fear belief. The corpse's lips peeled back slightly. I do not fear. You react. Silence. Hargrove lifted the cross, not as a weapon, but as a declaration. You demand I lie about alcohol to preserve despair, he continued, because despair feeds you. The corpse's chest cavity darkened unnaturally. You misunderstand, it hissed. No, Hargrove said steadily. You revealed yourself. The cabin walls groaned again. Wind battered the windows. You cannot take what is not given, Hargrove said. The corpse's eyes burned with sudden fury. Careful, Doctor. Hargrove took another step. You required invitation. The corpse's voice sharpened. Careful. You required consent. The lantern flame surged violently. The corpse lunged again, but this time it stopped mid-motion, as if striking an invisible barrier. The cross in Hargrove's hand burned hot against his palm. The corpse recoiled, not from pain, but from constraint. The air itself seemed to resist it. You close nothing, it snarled. Leave, Hargrove said. The word echoed strangely, not loud, but resonant. The corpse trembled visibly, not in weakness, in frustration. You misunderstand what I am, it whispered. Perhaps, Hargrove replied, but I know what you are not. The silence that followed felt immense, heavy. Then, the corpse's expression shifted, from anger to something almost weary. You will pay, it said softly. Perhaps, Hargrove answered. The corpse stepped backward, toward the table, toward the hollow chest cavity.
I take no souls, it murmured. I require only despair.
Hargrove did not move. Leave, he repeated. The lantern flame flared blindingly bright, then extinguished. Darkness swallowed the cabin. When light returned, faint moonlight through the windows, Daniel Carter's body lay once more on the table. Still, chest open, eyes closed. Gideon unmoving on the floor. Only the scent of sage and iron remained, and Hargrove stood alone in the dark, understanding that whatever had come through that door had not been nothing. It had been something that wanted him to believe it was, and that difference mattered more than anything he had ever studied. Dawn did not bring relief. It brought witnesses. By the time the first gray light crept over Black Hollow, Dr. Samuel Hargrove had not moved from where he stood. Gideon's body lay where it had fallen. Daniel Carter's corpse rested on the table exactly as before. Chest cavity open, organs catalogued, six-fingered hand dissected. If someone had walked in without context, they would have seen only one plausible narrative. A surgeon, a dead assistant, knives, blood. Eleanor Whitaker returned just after sunrise. She paused in the doorway. Her eyes took in everything. She did not scream. She did not gasp. She stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind her. Hargrove turned toward her. His face looked years older than it had the night before. He stood, Hargrove said immediately, voice cracked from hours of silence.
He spoke. Eleanor's gaze shifted to Gideon's body.
I know what you believe you saw, she said quietly.
He demanded I lie, Hargrove continued. About my research, about alcohol. He said despair brings order. Eleanor knelt beside Gideon and gently closed the young man's eyes.
You asked, she said softly.
Yes.
And you were answered.
Hargrove stared at her. You knew. Eleanor did not look at him.
I knew there are things that answer when called.
You permitted it.
I permitted you to ask, she corrected.
Hargrove's jaw tightened.
You sent me into it. I warned you, she said. You chose knowledge.
Before he could reply, the sound of horses and boots approached from outside. Voices. Official. The county sheriff entered first, followed by two deputies. They stopped just inside the threshold. The scene required no embellishment. Blood, steel instruments, an assistant with a crushed skull. The sheriff removed his hat slowly. Doctor, he said evenly. What happened here? Hargrove opened his mouth. Nothing came. He glanced at Eleanor. She stood near the stove, hands folded, eyes lowered. You'll want to speak carefully, the sheriff continued. Hargrove's mind raced. If he told them, the dead rose. It spoke of nothingness. It demanded falsehood. It killed Gideon. No jury would hear that as testimony. They would hear madness or guilt. He stood, Hargrove said anyway. The sheriff's brow furrowed. Who stood? The corpse. A deputy shifted uncomfortably. Doctor, the sheriff said gently. You've been under strain. He stood, Hargrove repeated. He killed Gideon. The sheriff's expression hardened, not cruel, but resolute. And the body returned to the table afterward? Yes. Convenient. Hargrove felt the walls closing in again. Eleanor finally spoke. I was not present, she said calmly. I cannot testify to what occurred. The sheriff nodded slowly.
But you left him alone with the body. Yes. And the assistant. Yes.
The sheriff turned back to Hargrove. "You performed an autopsy?"
Yes.
"At night?"
Yes.
"And your assistant now lies dead with a head injury consistent with blunt force trauma?" Hargrove swallowed.
Yes.
"And you claim the deceased rose and committed the act?"
Yes.
The sheriff sighed. "Doctor, I've buried too many men to entertain that explanation." Deputies stepped forward. "Samuel Hargrove," the sheriff said, voice formal now. "You are under arrest on suspicion of homicide." Cold iron cuffs bit into his wrists. Hargrove did not resist. He looked once more at Eleanor. "You knew what it was," he said quietly. She met his eyes for the first time since morning.
Yes. Why allow it? Because you needed to choose.
He did not understand, but he would have time to think. As they led him out of the cabin, townspeople gathered at a distance. Whispers traveled faster than horses in Black Hollow. "Surgeon kills assistant during midnight experiment." "War doctor loses mind." "Science without God." By afternoon, the story had hardened into certainty. The trial moved quickly. Small towns do not linger on ambiguity. The evidence was straightforward. Gideon's skull fractured by force. Instruments present. Only 2 men in the cabin, one alive, one dead. Hargrove told the story as it happened, every word, every exchange. The being's declaration of nothingness, its demand, its recoil at the cross. The courtroom listened with thin patience. The prosecutor did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Dr. Hargrove," he said calmly, "you ask this court to believe that a corpse rose, negotiated philosophy, and murdered your assistant." "Yes." "And that it demanded you falsify medical research." "Yes." "Is it possible," the prosecutor asked gently, "that fatigue, stress, and guilt influenced your perception?" "No." "Is it possible you struck Mr.
Gideon during an argument? No. Is it possible you regret your actions and have constructed a supernatural narrative to escape consequence? No. Silence filled the courtroom. The judge leaned back slightly. "The court does not try spirits," he said flatly. "It tries men." Verdict: guilty. Sentence: 15 years hard labor. Not death, not mercy. A measured punishment. As they led Hargrove away, Eleanor Whitaker sat in the back row. She did not cry. She did not defend. She simply watched. And when their eyes met one last time, she gave the slightest nod, as if to say, "Now you know." That night, in a cell that smelled of damp stone and rusted iron, Samuel Hargrove sat alone. The fear of death no longer troubled him. Something else did. If that being required despair, if it fed on hopelessness, then the worst thing he could do now was surrender to it. He pressed his cuffed hands against his knees and whispered into the dark, "If evil exists, then so does good." The cell did not answer. But for the first time in his life, he did not need it to. Prison did not feel like punishment at first. It felt like compression. The air inside the state penitentiary clung to the lungs like damp cloth. Stone walls sweated even in summer. Every sound carried. Chains shifting, coughing, muttered curses, the scrape of boots along concrete corridors.
Samuel Hargrove had spent years studying broken bodies. Now he studied broken men. They placed him in a narrow cell with another inmate, a gaunt man with hollow cheeks and a cough that seemed to tear through him from the inside out. For 2 days they did not speak. On the third night, the coughing grew worse. "Doctor," the man rasped in the dark. Hargrove did not answer immediately. He had not corrected anyone who called him that. "You're the surgeon," the man continued, breath hitching. "The one who killed his assistant." "I did not kill him." A thin, humorless chuckle. "That's what they all say." Silence lingered.
Then, "I'm dying," the man said plainly.
Hargrove turned on the cot, facing the shape beside him. "What's your name?"
"Raleigh Pierce."
The name meant nothing to him.
"I've got maybe a month," Raleigh continued. "Lungs gone. Fever comes at night. I feel it crawling up my ribs."
Hargrove shifted closer in the dimness.
"Let me see."
He examined him by touch, the rattle in the chest, the heat of infection, the weakness in the pulse.
"Tuberculosis. Advanced."
"You're right," Hargrove said quietly. Raleigh exhaled.
"Thought so."
The prison fell silent, except for distant metal doors.
"Tell me something," Raleigh said.
"What?"
"You seen death up close?"
"Yes."
"What's after?"
The question hung between them. Hargrove closed his eyes. The cabin returned to him in vivid clarity. The open chest cavity, the empty heart, the layered voice.
"Nothing waits. No light, no dark, no self."
He felt the old chill brush against him.
"I asked that once,"
he said carefully.
"And I was told there is nothing."
Raleigh's breath hitched.
"Nothing? No memory, no identity, no awareness."
The coughing returned, harsher this time.
"Then what's the point?"
Raleigh wheezed. Hargrove stared at the stone ceiling.
That was the danger. That was the trap.
Despair simplifies everything. If there is nothing, then why care? Why repent? Why endure? Why try?
"I don't think that answer was truthful,"
Hargrove said finally. Raleigh shifted weakly.
"You don't?"
"No."
"Why?"
Hargrove turned toward him.
"Because the thing that said it required me to spread hopelessness."
Raleigh let out a faint laugh that turned into another coughing fit.
"You're serious?"
"Yes."
"And you're not mad?" "I don't believe so."
Silence again. Raleigh's voice softened.
"I did terrible things," he said. "Killed a man in a robbery, left his kid without a father."
Hargrove did not respond.
"I told myself it was hunger, survival, that I had no choice."
Another cough.
"But I had choice."
"Yes," Hargrove said quietly.
Raleigh turned his face toward the wall. "I don't fear punishment. I fear it doesn't matter." The words struck deeper than Raleigh realized. That is the true terror. Not hell, not fire. Meaninglessness. Hargrove leaned back against the cold wall. "The being I saw," he said slowly, "wanted me to believe nothing matters. And I think it feeds on that belief." Raleigh stared into the darkness. "You think there's something else?" "I think evil requires contrast. And that means? It means good must exist." Raleigh's breathing steadied slightly. "You sound like a preacher." Hargrove almost smiled. "I used to argue against them." "What changed?" He did not answer immediately. What changed? A corpse that spoke.
a demand to lie, a recoil from prayer, a choice. "I realized despair is useful to something," he said finally, "and I refuse to be useful to it." Raleigh absorbed that in silence. After a moment, he whispered, "Then maybe I still got time to not be what I was." "Yes," Hargrove said. Raleigh turned slightly toward him. "You think I'm forgiven?" "That depends," Hargrove replied, "on whether you choose to be something different before the end." The cell grew quiet. Outside, wind brushed the barred window. Raleigh closed his eyes. "You'll sit with me?" he asked. "Yes." Hargrove remained awake long after Raleigh drifted into uneasy sleep. He watched the shadows stretch along the wall. He felt fear still, but not of death, of failing to stand firm. If that thing had told him truth, then nothing mattered. If it lied, then everything did. In the days that followed, Raleigh changed, not dramatically, not theatrically. He apologized to a guard he had once cursed. He shared bread without being asked. He listened when others spoke. Small acts, but real ones. And Hargrove began speaking quietly to other inmates. Not sermons, not doctrine, just this: if evil is real, then so is good. And if good exists, it must be chosen. Word spread slowly through the cell blocks.
The surgeon who killed a man now spoke of conscience like a man who had stared into the abyss and refused it. Some mocked him, some listened. Raleigh worsened by winter. One night, breath shallow, fingers trembling, he looked at Hargrove and whispered, "Tell me again." "What?" "That it matters." Hargrove leaned close. "It matters," he said firmly. Raleigh exhaled once, and did not inhale again. Hargrove closed his eyes. He felt grief. He felt sorrow, but not emptiness. And in that moment, he understood something the corpse had not accounted for. Hope does not require proof. It requires defiance. Somewhere far beyond prison walls, in a quiet cabin in Black Hollow, a lantern flickered unexpectedly, as if something had just lost ground. Winter tightened around the penitentiary like a fist. Ice crept along the iron bars each morning, and the wind howled through the cracks in the stone like something searching for entry. Inside, men coughed, cursed, prayed, or lay silent in their bunks, counting regrets. Samuel Hargrove no longer counted days. He counted choices. After Raleigh's death, something subtle shifted in the cell block. Not dramatically, no revival, no mass repentance, but small fractures appeared in the monotony of despair. A thief who once hoarded food began splitting his rations. A man serving life for arson stopped provoking fights. Two inmates who had not spoken in months shared a conversation that did not end in violence. No miracles, just resistance. Hargrove spoke when asked, sat in silence when not. He did not preach about heaven. He did not describe angels. He simply said, "If nothing matters, then cruelty is easy. But if something matters, even unseen, then we are accountable." It was enough. One evening, nearly a year after his sentencing, the prison chaplain approached his cot. "I've heard you've been talking," the chaplain said gently. "I have. You do not speak like a theologian." "I am not one." "Then what are you?" Hargrove considered the question. "A man who was offered despair and refused." The chaplain studied him carefully. "You claim to have seen something." "Yes." "And it told you nothing waits after death." "Yes." "And yet here you are, speaking of hope."
It wanted me to believe in nothing, Hargrove said, because nothing is fertile soil. The chaplain nodded slowly. For what? Control. The chaplain left him with the Finn Bible the following day. Hargrove did not read it immediately. He did not need the pages to validate what he already knew. Faith had not come to him through Scripture. It had come through confrontation. Months passed. Work details, harsh labor, cold meals, quiet evenings. And still, something within the prison walls resisted rot. Not because conditions improved, but because men began choosing differently. One night, as wind rattled the outer gate, Hargrove lay awake. The memory returned, vivid and sharp. The corpse standing before the mirror. I require only despair. He understood it now. Despair is surrender. It is the surrender of will, the surrender of moral effort, the surrender of light before darkness has earned it. And that being, whatever it was, had mistaken him. It believed knowledge without faith would collapse. It believed fear of nothingness would break him. Instead, it had forced him to choose. And in choosing, he had found belief. Not blind belief, not inherited belief, but deliberate belief. Years later, word of his influence reached beyond the prison. Reports circulated of a physician who counseled inmates not with doctrine, but with responsibility. A man who never denied the existence of evil because he had seen it, but who insisted that evil's existence proved something greater. His sentence was eventually reduced for good conduct and educational service among inmates. When Samuel Hargrove walked free, his hair was threaded with gray.
He did not return immediately to Black Hollow, but eventually he did. The cabin still stood, older, weather-worn. Eleanor Whitaker opened the door before he could knock. She looked thinner, but steady. "You chose," she said simply. "Yes." She studied his face. "And?" "It was not nothing." She nodded. "I know." They sat at the old oak table where Daniel Carter's body had once lain. The shelves of herbs still lined the walls. "You knew what would answer," Hargrove said quietly. "I knew something would." "And you sent me." "I gave you the choice to ask." Silence settled between them, not heavy this time. "Did it return?" he asked. Eleanor's gaze drifted toward the window. "It tries," she said, "in whispers, in despair, in men who believe nothing matters." He understood. It did not need corpses. It needed surrender. He stood and walked to the old mirror. His reflection stared back, aged, scarred by experience, but clear-eyed. "You said knowledge requires exchange," he murmured to the empty room. There was no response, no flicker, no voice, only wind through the trees. Eleanor rose and placed a bundle of dried sage into his hands. "For steadiness," she said. He nodded. As he stepped outside into the fading light of evening, he looked once more at the hills of Black Hollow. The world had not changed. Death still came. Suffering still walked freely. Men still destroyed themselves. But something else walked just as persistently. Choice. And somewhere beyond sight, beyond flesh, beyond the fragile boundary between life and death, a quiet war continued. Not of fire and thunder, but of belief. Samuel Hargrove did not know what waited after death. He did not pretend certainty. But he knew this: if evil demanded despair, then hope was rebellion. And he intended to keep rebelling until his last breath.